It's beginning to feel like there's no part of our lives that robots won't invade. Home, work, and play. We're next joined by 3 roboticists delving into these areas. One is using open source to let developers in on the process of creating its robots. Another is making security robots to lower city crime rates. While the third is building robotic arms for manufacturing work. Please give a warm welcome in conversation with the Wall Street Journal's Steve Rosenbusch, Knightscope's Mercedes Soria, Misty Robotics' Ian Bernstein, and Carbon Robotics' Rosanna Myers.
Good afternoon. So we have, I think, a really incredible panel on robotics. And this is a technology or an idea that's captured people's imagination for many, many decades. And now it's sort of moving beyond imagination. And it's becoming part of everyone's daily life, or it's about to. And I think it's going to happen in many different ways. And you'll see just what the breadth of that really is as you get to know these panelists. So I'm going to let them describe how they approach robotics and how they approach the market, and then we'll take the conversation from there. Rosanna, we'll begin with you, please.
So I'm Rosanna from Carbon Robotics. We build intelligent robotic arms for light industrial manufacturing. And so we're starting to automate many of the tasks that previously have been considered unautomatable because of cost or because they're not flexible enough. And so the way we really think about getting robots into new environments is a couple of things. One, it's shifting the unit economics, because robots have been ferociously expensive, and so they're really interesting new distribution models, and you know a lot about that. But it's also designing robots in ways that people who are outside of the industry and maybe know their task, but they don't know anything about robots, so that they can start to be interacting with robots. And that's, I think for us, it's fundamentally a human story.
Thank you. Mercedes, please.
Mercedes Soria, VP of Software Engineering at Knightscope. So what we do at Knightscope is we build what we call the ultimate security guard. So that means it's an autonomous robot that goes around on its own and scouts the place, scouts the location for anything that is out of the ordinary. And if something happens, they alert a human to come in and take care of whatever the problem is. So Knightscope has been around since 2013. We started to get our first clients in 2015. We are a machine-as-a-service model, so you pay by the hour of what you consume of the machines. And our goal is to predict and prevent crime one day and reduce the $1 trillion that crime costs to the United States of America.
Great. Thank you. Ian, please. Who's this?
This is Misty. So yeah, Ian Bernstein, let's see, 8 years ago, started a company called Sphero. We made robot balls. 2015, we made BB-8, the app-controlled BB-8 from Star Wars. Shipped lots of those units. And about a year ago, spun a new company out of Sphero called Misty Robotics to look at how do we put a robot in every home and office. Well, we start with developers. So we're working on a really programmable robot called Misty, which we're actually just announcing today, as well as a pre-sale campaign. So it's a super easy to program robot, and that's what we're working on.
Cool. So where are we in the adoption of robotics into the workplace, into daily life? And I'm going to just throw that question out to the group, and let's take it from there.
Yes, so for us at Knightscope, we started in 2013, and it wasn't easy because people weren't ready for a robot taking over tasks that a security guard could do. We started with a lot of, hey, give me a demo, or give me a 3-month free pilot, and companies were doing that. But then eventually, once they saw the return of investment, once they saw that, hey, this robot is actually helping me, that's when there's more adoption of it. And
if we compare robotics to, say, the adoption of social media or the internet itself, where are we? Is it 1992? Is it 1996? Where do you think we are?
I mean, related to like personal computers, I think we're in the mid 70s. So we're at that phase when there's just a lot of people building computers over and over. There was mainframes and research labs and stuff, but it hasn't quite gotten mass consumer yet.
In the mid 70s, we're walking around with cardboard stacks in our pocket. That's where we are right now?
Yes.
Okay. Rosanna, where do you think we are?
I was going to say the 80s, but
Okay.
Still definitely very
A
early
good decade.
on. It's because a lot of the tools just haven't been cost effective enough. They haven't been flexible enough. They haven't been able to do the work that people need to be done for there to even be adoption. So it's almost like asking about social media when we're still trying to build like Linux.
So how quickly do things progress from here? Do we move from the 70s or the 80s into the future very quickly, or does this play out over 20, 30 years?
In my eyes, it's going to take time. People are more accepting. I mean, we're in Silicon Valley. People are very accepting of robots. But I think it still takes a lot of time. It's kind of like what's happening with AI. They're developing parallel. They had many winters of AI, but I think we're at the beginning of the true robotics age at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's going to evolve. I mean, so one of the things that a lot of the robotics companies are doing now is building the infrastructure for more people to develop, for them to be used in more applications. And so I think that there are going to be, just like with computers, there are going to be these ages of maybe 5, 6 years where it's a different type of development. And so I think the people that you see in robotics today developing applications are like hardcore roboticists. In 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be people developing web applications today and mobile applications today. So that's going to evolve.
What are some of the challenges that you as developers have to work through?
So some of the challenges, I'll take that, but you should talk. You haven't talked yet. So some of the challenges that we have experienced with customers is they think that the machine does way, way more than it actually does, right? They think that just because it has a camera now, it's going to connect to the database of the government, and now they're going to profile you. They have stories like that when what we're doing is we're determining that there's a person and we're determining that there's a face. But we're in no way tied to government databases. So they're, in a way, almost afraid of what's happening.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge right now for robotics companies is expectations of customers. They see robots in movies and science fiction, but the state of technology today is nowhere near that. So what people are expecting in your robot, there's kind of a big disconnect. So some sort of education we have to do.
I did take a look at a number of DARPA videos on YouTube in which there were 8-foot-tall humanoid death-dealing robots bashing down doors. Is that a thing?
I mean, that's Megabots, right? It's a company that's trying to create a show around. I mean, they're not really robots per se because they're sort of human controlled. But I think there's lots of different places where robots are, right? There's industrial, but what we're working on is trying to create robots that do useful things for us, that augment what we're trying, augment us in our daily lives, like robots that will help eventually do our laundry and cook us food and stuff like that, do deliveries around your office.
So at some point in the not-too-distant future, is it fair to say that we'll actually be living with robots? They'll be walking around in our homes, in our offices, on the street?
Eventually, I think that's definitely the case. Where it's starting is where there are the biggest needs today. So that's why a lot of businesses where they're actually struggling to either find people to do the work or they're struggling to make their businesses work. That's where it starts. But all of that is laying the foundation for being able to be in the home. So there are really big problems that we still have around safety, and I think actually your point around expectations is huge with this, because people think that robots are safe and they're really not. And so they interact with it differently. And there are ways in the controlled environment where you can design cages around your robot, or you can have it so that no one would ever get hurt. But imagine you've got a dog running in and a kid running in. You have to solve safety in a really big way, and it has to be right.
Where do you see the beginning of demand for robots in the enterprise, Rosanna?
Sorry, the
Where do
beginning
you see the beginning of demand for robots in the enterprise, in manufacturing, logistics, supply chain?
Yeah, so obviously we're biased, but no, there really is the biggest pull from manufacturing. So most people, when you think of things being manufactured, you think it's highly automated, even when it's millions of devices, but actually 90% of all of the tasks that could be automated are done by hand. And they're typically things like put board into jig, attach wire, and you've got people who are sitting there for 8 hours a day doing the same thing day in, day out, and that's how production is done.
I think that one of the aspects of adoption that's been so important in technology since forever is cost, complexity, distribution. Really interested in how the three of you think those issues get worked out in the near future.
Yeah, so in our case, at Nightscope, we chose the hardest path. So
What is the hardest part?
we chose the hardest
Oh,
path.
you chose it, okay.
Which is we design, we build, we maintain, we do everything. Think of what Apple does for their phones. They manage the whole line, and that's what we do at Nightscope. So that's kind of like the hard way. But I think once we get to a point in which it's now a normal thing for people to do, there's going to be more people that can do that work. Like, for example, we are putting together parts. We might have machines that put those parts together, and at that point we can go faster. So it's just a matter of time.
I think Rosanna has a lot of stuff with manipulation. Getting manipulators cheaper is going to be really important for robots, because if you're going to cook food and do your laundry, there needs to have arms and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of technology there that will bring down costs. But also, your home purchases will change in the pretty near future. Like, we're not going to have any reason to buy cars other than maybe you just really like to drive. It's all going to be automated. Everything's going to be Lyfts and Ubers. So, a car is a major purchase for a family right now. If maybe, for a lot, the biggest purchase. You're not going to buy a car anymore, you're going to buy a robot. And your robot's going to do lots of different things for you.
And I think as well, that's a really good point, and I think that the costs that people often don't realize are how they stack up as well. So people look at it and they say there's a sticker price of a robot, but then there's everything else that goes into it. And so when we look at how do you make it easy for somebody to adopt a robot, you're not just looking at the hardware cost. That's huge, but that's a piece of it. You're looking at everything you need to do around it. Who's going to program it? Who's going to pay for the person who's going to program it? Does the robot know what to do? All of these things have to be solved so that the whole package is really cost effective.
And how does the distribution model change?
So for us, I think there's a really big change happening because, so typically when people, unless you're Tesla, typically when people buy robots for their factory, they go through an integrator. And the integrator is the person who says, you want this robot and I'm going to program it for you. And so there are sort of negative incentives because, one, they're selling you the product, and two, they benefit from it being really hard to use. And that's not in the interest of the end user. And so that's changing.
I'm interested in how each of you view open source in robotics. Ian, let's start with you, since you have some very clear thoughts on that area.
So open source in robotics. We use lots of different pieces, like a lot of pieces from OpenCV and TensorFlow and stuff like that for mostly our computer vision. And then we do lots of stuff like Misty, for instance, has this little backpack that's magnetic, and in here is actually a little Arduino board, so you can take your existing Arduino project, which is all open source, and now make it robot enabled, which you can stick your shields on the back.
So open source for us was great. We started with open source. We are using the robot operating system. It was great to get us off the ground to a certain point. But once we started to look at our own application, like what does my video feed look like? It's different from your video feed, and it's different from her video feed. So once you have to get very particular and you try to do something with that information, that's when we had to start writing our own code.
The world's in this enormous debate right now over how data should be governed, over how social media should be governed. How do you see this debate affecting your particular businesses, where do robots belong and not belong?
Okay.
Anyone can jump in.
Okay, I got it. So for us, at the beginning, we had to do a lot of informing our customers. So the average person might not know this, but your picture gets taken 60 times a day in average. So you go to the supermarket, there's a camera. You go to the ATM, there's a camera. And people don't realize that. And once we start explaining things like that, we're not capturing anything that people are not already capturing for you. They're a lot more understandable of that.
Yeah, I think for us, transparency is really key for this because we need the data so that we can learn and we make a better product, and that's important. But at the same time, people need to know what they are and they're not sharing. And I think that the point you bring up about Facebook is great, that everyone signs the terms and conditions, but do they really know what that means? And so I think that there are no real rules around this, around what you have to share now. Maybe that will change. But as much as anything, it's just being extremely transparent about this is what is yours and this is what we're learning from.
I think there's a good balance. So when we think of, privacy and security is obviously extremely important, and we're building that from the framework up. But on one side, you can have just a complete open system so people can be completely creative around it and do whatever they want with the product. And on the other side, everything's sandboxed and locks down and completely secure. At this stage in robots, when we're trying to figure out how these things are best used in the home and the office, we're starting with more on that side of open. Yes, it's going to be a little less secure, but people have more creative freedom to do what they want. And then as we move more towards these robots being actually in people's homes as a consumer product, then we start to have to lock some things down.
What do we expect these robots to look like, and what should they look like? It's really kind of powerful to have this humanoid or animal-like machine here, but is that a good thing? Do we want to have attachment to robots?
I think in our experience, what's happened to us is we have 4 products, and we put a product in the place of a customer depending on what you need. So if you're outside, you get a 400-pound unit. If you're inside, you get a 200-pound unit.
So they're different answers.
So it's just different.
I think what's interesting is that you can design it as a humanoid, and people have this idea of connection because it feels like a toy or a pet, or they assign a lot of emotion to it. But what we found is we don't have anything like a face on the arm. We don't have any of those things. We do have visual communication, but people still really feel a connection to it. And so it's exciting to see. I think you have to go with it. That's an innately human thing, to want to connect to the tool, and so to use that so that they understand it more is a good idea.
And same for us. We have no face, and the robots are all in there naming the machines.
And what is this the form that the robot should take?
Yeah, so something interesting that we learned when we shipped BB-8, we shipped millions of the robots all over the world, and something that we found that was interesting was, for instance, Siri. If Siri doesn't respond to you correctly, it's broken, like it's trash. But when we saw people actually create a connection with BB-8, and BB-8 didn't do the right thing or it got stuck, people actually felt bad for it and they would help it. So we look for that connection that you can have with the robot, we can actually sort of solve some of our technological problems with that connection.
Right. We have about 1 minute left. I'm going to ask each of you to look as far into the future as you care to. Give us one moonshot idea. What is the most ambitious thing that we can actually expect from robots? Rosanna, let's start with you.
So I will think that ultimately we will have mobile manipulators, which means robots that move around but can pick stuff up in the house. But the way that we get there is by solving safety, security, by making it so that people can develop. But we will get there. We absolutely will get there.
So for us at Nightscope, we imagine a future in which every single school, every single office, every single bank has robots there for security. And security guards who don't like their job today, they hate what they do, there's a turnover rate of 400%. They will not be doing more high-level jobs that they will be actually happy about.
All right. Ian.
One of my favorite shows when I was a kid was the Jetsons, and I'm looking for Rosie.
We have Rosie.
We're looking for robots that can cook and clean, but also hang out with us, and they're cool.
So we become friends with robots.
Yeah.
We will. Is that a good thing? And as we become friends or friendly with robots, do they become smarter and do they get to know us a little bit better?
I think they become smarter and they learn us, but it's sort of interesting to look at the relationship between machines and between people, because in many ways what we're doing when we bring robots into these different environments is we're allowing humans to be a little bit more human. We're getting to a point where we're not treating humans like machines. And so part of that is learning, part of that's distribution, but all of it is changing the relationship. So I think that all of these futures are not that far away.
Great. We'll have to leave it right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.